Okay, in this video we're going to talk about spatial audio for Google VR. There's a really good audio spatializer that comes with Google VR built in, and in the new Google VR update, there's a really nice example scene. So let's check that all out. First of all, let me start with the brand new Unity project. And then I have the Google VR SDK right here. I'm going to import the Google VR for Unity package. So now that I got the Google VR SDK here in Unity, I also need to bring in the spatial audio project. So if you go to the Google SDK master, you're going to see there's a samples folder. And there's a couple of folders in here: the Cardboard Design Lab, Castle Defense, the Daydreams Lab, Controller Playground, and Spatial Audio. So the Spatial Audio actually is a Unity project. If I go into the Assets folder, I'm going to see there's the Cardboard SDK here, and then there's Audio Spaces. So it looks like I could just bring Audio Spaces in to my Assets folder, and everything is hopefully going to work. Okay, environment_space.fbx takes a while to import. But now that that's imported, we're ready to go. There is an error here. And it says, the name or namespace cardboard audio source could not be found. Well, that makes sense, since cardboard audio source has been completely replaced with GVR audio source. So let me fix that. Let's go back to Unity. And we have more errors. The environment change. The SDK, Cardboard SDK triggered. So the replacement for that is GVR viewer dot instance dot triggered. And so we got the same thing here. We just need to replace cardboard.sdk with gvrviewer.instance. All right, everything looks good now. If we go to the project, we're going to see that there is, under audio spaces, there's the audio spaces scene. And it doesn't look like much, but if you press play, you still don't see much. And the reason why is because it told us right here in the console, the scenes haven't been added to the build settings, so they can't be loaded at runtime. This is actually a really good way to set up your VR scene. Have your VR main in an empty scene by itself, scene 0, and load everything else additively. So if we look into the scenes folder, we're going to see that there's 4 scenes. So let's go to the build settings and bring those 4 scenes in. And I'm going to clear the console and press play. And so here we go. It is working. It says failed to initialize spatializer. And the reason why is because if we go to project settings audio, there's a spatializer plugin, and right now it's none. We need to set that to the Google VR audio spatializer. So let's hit play, and what do we have? The phone is ringing. And it's spatialized. Now you're going to remember there's 4 different scenes. So if you click on one of these boxes that highlights, it's going to play and stop the sound. But if you click anywhere else, like into the empty scene, it's going to change the scene. So we got the bird chirping inside of the house. And here we go in a cave. Now this sounds a lot better outside. The bird sounds like it's outside. There's space. So you can hear how build it for VR and see how it sounds. In order to do that, you need to go to build settings, and under your player settings, you can set your company, but most importantly, you're going to need to make sure that you do landscape left, and more importantly, switch it to Android. Now that it's switched over to Android, we want to set the rotation to landscape left, and we at least need to give it a bundle identifier. Okay, so now we're ready to build and run, and we can check this out in VR. It looks really good and sounds really good, but I'll tell you right now, it's not going to work, and that's because we haven't set the correct scene 0. That needs to be the audio spaces scene. So I'm going to bring the audio spaces scene into the build, but you can see it's at the build order number 4. We need to bring that up to 1, to 0. I mean, because 0 is going to be the first scene that gets loaded. From there, the rest of these get loaded additively. And like I said, this is a really good way to design your VR scenes. Have your Google VR main or your VR main object in a scene by itself, maybe with a game control or some game logic, and then load your levels additively. So how does all this work? If you look at the Google VR main under the main camera, there's a component on it called the Google VR audio listener, and you can set the quality. How all this works is described right here on the Google VR spatial audio page. But we got the Google VR audio listener on the main camera, and then normally you would put the Google VR audio source on objects. For example, here in the cave, we would put an audio source on the bird. We'd say add component, Google VR audio source, and assign a sound to it. But in this case, we're loading 4 different scenes that have sounds in the same exact place. So what Google has done here is they just put the sounds into the audio spaces scene. Underneath of the logic, there's guitar, telephone, bird, and clock. And you're going to see that they have their colliders here and their audio sources. So everything is essentially right here. What gets loaded additively via the other 4 scenes is just visuals. But you have the guitar and the source. So you have an audio source. It has the audio clip assigned to it. And it just works like a regular Unity audio source. But it responds to Spatial, the Spatial engine, because on the head we have the audio listener. In addition to that, there is some room effects. So if you go into each one of the scenes and you notice the sound really changes when you go between, for example, inside and outside, that's actually inside of the scenes. So if I go into the cave, you're going to find in the cave that there is a room, and what this room is the Google VR audio room, and they've set properties for the left wall, right wall, floor, ceiling, back wall, front wall, the reflectivity, reverb, the size of it. So that also largely affects how the audio sounds in the spatial audio engine. Let's also look at the living room. Here we go. There's the living room. It has a size defined. Actually, they're using the transform to define the size and just doing a 111 here. But they've changed the walls and the ceiling, and you can obviously see the same type of room in the outside area and the space. So here's the room. It's a really large room. It's a massive room. So that is how you use the Google VR spatial audio engine. And this is a really good example to check it out for yourself. Just remember, you have to go to Project Settings Audio and set that Spatializer plugin in order for that to work. So hope this helps you guys out. Really cool little intro Google's put together for the Spatialized engine. And it should make it easy bringing rooms and spatial audio sources into your games and experiences. Thanks for watching. Give it a like, share it with some VR developers, and let's build some cool stuff.